Hello, I'm Anastasia. I'm excited because this is the very first video in a very long time. And when I say in a very long time, it's been a couple of years since I did something on my YouTube channel. And if you haven't noticed, I've changed the theme to Solidarity for Earth. And I'm excited because this video comes at the backdrop of the International Women's Day. So this particular video is focusing on women. In focus, therefore, it's, of course, the celebration of women across the globe. So this year's International Women's Day was about breaking the bias. The world came together, of course, under this particular theme, gender equality for a sustainable tomorrow. And of course, this also was a call for climate action for women and by women. I did this particular video as a way to reconnect with my audience. Regardless of how small it is, I feel that it comes at a very special time when the globe was celebrating the International Women's Day this week. So why am I doing this video? It's because I believe that women have come a long way and have fought as well to be able to attain some sort of, or rather an element of equality, be it in education, in politics, in business, and many other spheres of life. So in focus today, and I take this from, the UN Women's website that has expressed the link between women and climate change. And of course, Women's Day comes at a time when the planet is experiencing myriads of challenges in terms of climate change, climate crisis. And I'll give you an example before I delve into the views expressed by UN Women, which really I identify with. So, I believe there are several Africans watching me, and because this is very unique to Africa, I believe. I don't know whether the rest of the world do the same, but I'll give you a picture. You're in the village. The village is what we call the countryside. And you meet a woman. She's carrying firewood on her head. Possibly she has a jerrycan or a 20-liter container, I'll call it, full of water. You can call it a drum, but that 20 liters, they're very common in Africa. On top, of course, firewood. On their backs, water. And you might even be more surprised that towards their bosoms, they're possibly carrying a child. So for me, that image depicts not all African women, but the common African woman who's not rich or who's in the margins, whereby there is no electricity, there is no piped water, and they have to take care, of course, of house chores. So with that picture in mind, and I know you'll see me look down a little bit because I will be looking at my notes. I go back to the views expressed by the UN Women. And of course, this year's International Women's Day was about breaking barriers. And of course, the world came together under the theme, gender equality for a sustainable tomorrow. So this year's International Women's Day was about breaking bias. The world came together under the theme, gender equality for a sustainable tomorrow. And this, of course, calls for climate action for women and by women. That's the theme, gender equality for a sustainable tomorrow. And a tagline, or I would say the message coming out of this is, of course, calling out on everybody to realize the place of women in climate action. Now, UN Women, of course, quote data. But they say, based on the latest data, we now understand the vital link between gender, social equity, and climate change, and recognize that without gender equality today, a sustainable future, an equal future remains out of reach. So I come back to the image of an African woman that I had just highlighted. So what does this mean? Women and girls experience the greatest impacts of the climate crisis as it amplifies existing gender inequalities and puts women's lives and livelihoods at risk. Now, the picture of an African woman that I used, and I mean within most African villages, it's not everywhere, it's not an image perhaps you'll see within the urban centers, because the image in urban centers is very different, yet very familiar. It's just different in how it is done. In the urban center, perhaps, it will be a woman working very early in the morning to be able to go and do some house chores in maybe a suburb. So in Kenya, for instance, you'll find women trekking from the slums, let's say Kibera, or in parts of Mathare, etc., to go to the suburbs or the organized estates to wash clothes. You will see them, many of them, sitting within organized estates outside on stones, waiting to be called upon to do laundry. So the image is still the same, yet varied in the way that it is expressed. In the village, firewood, 20-liter jerry can or container, and a child on the front. In the urban center, women sitting outside an organized estate so that they're able to be called out, or rather, someone passing by can call them to wash clothes or to do laundry within what we call the middle class. Or because I tend to believe that most wealthy people have either washing machines or laundry, not that middle class do not have, but just a common occurrence, for instance, within where I live, not so much, like outside, but I know that within the same area, women tend to sit waiting to be called upon to do house chores. Anyway, with that picture, I'm back to UN Women. They say across the globe, women depend more on, yet have less access to natural resources. So women depend on natural resources, yet have less access to them, and often bear, of course, a disproportionate responsibility for securing food, water, and fuel. The image that I gave you. So that woman is possibly the one walking from the village, firewood, water, maybe a child on her bosom. She's carrying, of course, I'm sure, some sort of food, maybe cassava or maize flour. So she has three things, literally those things expressed here within her own self. Don't take it literally. It's just painting a picture of the reality of women within the margins, and of course women within the urban centers. Because not every woman is able to have a career. Not every woman can be a manager within a big organization. Yet, though the roles are so varied, women still find themselves disproportionately affected by the responsibilities that a normal household requires or needs. So then, as women, therefore, as women and girls bear the burden of climate impacts, because firewood is a contributor, they need it. within the village, because that is the source of fuel that they have. That is what they can afford. Possibly they do not even have gas, hence the firewood. And even sometimes, even when we go for Christmas gatherings, we still have firewood and still have gas. But in the villages, really, it is firewood. Firewood equals, of course, cutting of trees. So climate change. But they need it. But because, many cannot afford, gas, then, the impacts of climate change are felt in the sense that, cutting of trees and the need for firewood, still that leads, of course, to, the reducing levels of water. So at the end of the day, the actions of all of us, whether in the village, whether in the urban centers, affect women. So, because women need food, they need water, they need fuel. But then again, how can women be involved in the climate crisis to be aware of the alternative means of fuel, to be able to perhaps get into action, plant more trees in order for them their villages to have water catchment areas. Therefore, they do not have to travel for long distances and have to carry so much on their backs because of the lack of water, or because, as we say, disproportionately, the effects trickle down to the very essence of normal living, or rather daily lives. Anyway, moving on, therefore, as I said, as women and girls bear the burden of climate impact, they are also essential. So I've just talked about, or rather explained, what would mean, firewood, water, long distances, having to cut trees to be able to cook. So making women also aware, and I'm talking about the women in the margins at this particular moment, they also making them aware that they are also essential to leading and driving climate change in climate adaptation, mitigation, and solutions. So how do we solve the long distances to go and fetch water? How do we solve the solution of cheaper gas for women in the villages, or alternative means of fuel, of cooking, of charcoal, or stoves that are energy efficient? So enabling them to be part of the solutions, because at the end of the day, they are affected by the climate crisis, and then as much as they're affected by the climate crisis, they can be the driving force to having a better planet. So without the inclusion of half of the world's population, therefore, it is unlikely that solutions for a sustainable planet and a gender equal world tomorrow will be realized. Look at the picture that I've given. So without women, without enabling women, without making it easier for women, then we cannot realize a sustainable future. We cannot realize a world that is equal. We cannot realize adoption. We cannot realize conservation. And women make half of the population of the world. Therefore, this is very important. And I agree with the sentiments by UN Women. So, as I conclude, I would like also to talk about, women within the urban areas. And regardless of this, the industry women are in, be it business, because breaking the bias not only just is about women in leadership or women in careers or women in, but I call them organized, or rather, white collar jobs really, but it touches on every woman in society. How do women, the ones that I've given the example of women sitting outside organized estates on stones waiting to be called upon, how do you empower those women to break the bias, to be self-reliant? How can we empower them to break those particular biases that their only use is to do laundry because perhaps they do not have formal education or education of any sort, or the perception that they're poor and they do not have connections to be able to find a job, because there are graduates who are doing a lot of informal, or rather, they're doing a lot of things that are rather jobs that they've not studied for, or perhaps because they do not have the jobs, you find them doing the laundry. And these are people who've, gone through college education, university, but it is their only source of income, therefore they do it. Don't get me wrong, it is not bad to do it. But I believe that to ensure that we place women in various spheres of employment, an employment that is, that has also dignity. I'm not saying that it is wrong to do laundry. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that we need to support women to realize other dreams, to be business owners, because that drives the economy. That ensures that women in the village are able to be part of the conversation on climate crisis, or on climate change, or on ways that they can improve the lives of their children in the future. So, and then I come back to speaking about women in white collar jobs, managers and CEOs and executives, officers, people who are employed. I believe that every woman can be able to break the biases that exist within our own industries, whether it is within a household, as working as, as a domestic manager, or within an organization heading an entire department, or being employed, because the biases really exist. But it's up to us to recognize them and begin to make strides towards achieving better for this planet, better for our children, and better for the future. And that better includes an awareness on climate action, an awareness for engaging women into ways that we can improve our very own lives and improve our participation in ensuring that we have a better earth, we have a better tomorrow that, the carbon print is low, a better tomorrow whereby we are seeing more tree planting and more ecological ways of living, even within our own households. So that awareness is where I come I close this particular video on. We need to engage women. We need to hold those conversations, and we need to support women to be able to have them contribute towards climate action. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.